In the spring of 2009, Dr. Eleanor Hayes was cataloging forgotten medical equipment in the basement archives of the University of Vermont's Billings Library when she discovered something that would challenge everything she thought she understood about human consciousness. Dr. Hayes, a historian specializing in 19th century medicine in rural New England, had been hired to digitize records from the old Rutland Mining Company, documents dating back to Vermont's copper mining boom of the 1850s. Most of the material was exactly what you'd expect: injury logs, death certificates, company correspondence about wages and working conditions. But on March 17, 2009, she opened a leather medical trunk that had been sealed and marked "Property of Dr. Nathaniel Morrison, Confidential Medical Study, not to be opened until 100 years after my death." Dr. Morrison had died in 1897. The trunk had been sealed for 112 years. Inside, Dr. Hayes found 38 death certificates from Copper Falls, Vermont, a mining settlement that no longer exists on any modern map. The certificates documented deaths between 1855 and 1857. Every single certificate contained the same notation handwritten in the margin: "Death predicted by Bennett children. Type verified by specialist child. All 4 children concur. Prediction accurate." 38 death certificates, 38 predictions. But what made Dr. Hayes's blood run cold wasn't just the accuracy. It was the pattern she discovered when she organized the certificates by the name of which child had made each prediction. 4 children, 4 types of death, perfect specialization, 0 overlap. Samuel Bennett, age 12, had predicted 11 deaths, all from disease: tuberculosis, scarlet fever, typhoid, infected wounds. Every prediction he made involved illness, never accident, never violence, only disease. Rebecca Bennett, age 10, had predicted 14 deaths, all from accidents: mine collapses, falls from heights, drowning, machinery accidents. Every prediction she made involved accidental death, never disease, never violence, only accidents. Jacob Bennett, age 8, had predicted 7 deaths, all from violence: bar fights, domestic disputes, confrontations between minors. Every prediction he made involved violent death, never disease, never accidents, only violence. 4 siblings, 4 completely separate categories of death, each child seeing only their designated type. But here's what made the case truly unprecedented. According to Dr. Morrison's detailed medical notes, the children were only accurate when all 4 of them agreed that a death was coming. When they disagreed about whether someone would die, when their specializations conflicted, the person lived. The children appeared to function as a single predictive system distributed across 4 bodies, each component seeing one piece of the larger pattern. Separately, they were unreliable. Together, they were perfect. Dr. Hayes spent the next 5 years investigating the Bennett case. What she found was even more disturbing: detailed neurological examinations conducted by 2 separate physicians, sworn testimony from over 60 witnesses, letters from Yale Medical School requesting the case be classified, and a theoretical framework proposed by Dr. Morrison that would not be scientifically plausible until modern neuroscience discovered distributed neural networks 150 years later. This is the true story of the Bennett siblings of Copper Falls, Vermont, 4 children who divided death into 4 categories and predicted the future with perfect accuracy as long as they stayed together. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why the case was sealed for over a century and why modern neuroscientists still cannot explain what these children could do.
This channel explores mysteries that science has tried and failed to explain.
Cases that were hidden, suppressed, or deliberately destroyed because they challenged everything we thought we knew about human potential. Before we reveal what happened in Copper Falls, hit subscribe. We bring you one unexplained historical case every week, stories that were buried for a reason. Drop a comment. What state are you from? Because what happened in Vermont might be closer to your home than you think. And as you'll learn, the Bennett bloodline may still exist somewhere in New England. Now, let's go back to 1856, in the mountains of Vermont, where four orphaned children were about to demonstrate an ability so specific, so specialized, and so thoroughly documented that it would force an entire medical community to question the very nature of consciousness itself. To understand what happened to the Bennett children, you first need to understand Copper Falls, Vermont in 1856, a place that existed for barely 20 years before being abandoned, a community that literally vanished from the map when the copper ran out. Copper Falls was established in 1847 when prospectors discovered a rich copper vein in the Green Mountains, about 40 miles east of Rutland. Unlike the established towns of Vermont, places with generations of history and stable populations, Copper Falls was a boom town, thrown together quickly, populated by people chasing fortune. By 1856, the settlement had grown to a population of approximately 380 souls. 300 were miners and their families. 80 were support workers, shopkeepers, blacksmiths, a doctor, a school teacher, and the women who ran boarding houses and saloons. The town was brutal. Mining accidents were common, cave-ins, falling rock, explosions from blasting powder, men crushed by ore carts. The work was dangerous, the pay was modest, and the life expectancy was short. But Copper Falls had something most mining camps didn't: Dr. Nathaniel Morrison. Understanding Dr. Morrison is essential to understanding why this case is so thoroughly verified. Unlike the typical frontier doctor, often a failed physician from back east, or a self-taught amateur with a medical kit, Morrison was a graduate of Harvard Medical School, class of 1848. He had studied under Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., one of the most respected physicians in America. Morrison had come to Vermont for his health. He suffered from consumption and believed the mountain air would help. He had no intention of staying. But when he arrived in Copper Falls in 1852 and saw the appalling medical conditions, something in him couldn't leave. His personal journals, which survive in the University of Vermont archives, reveal a man of rigorous scientific training and deep skepticism. I came to these mountains to die quietly. Instead, I have found myself documenting more medical impossibilities than I ever encountered in Boston. Not superstitions, impossibilities, things that should not be, yet are. The Bennett children chief among them. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Copper Falls in 1856 was a town under strain. The easy copper was running out. The mine owners were pushing deeper, taking greater risks. Accidents were increasing, and the winter of 1855-1856 had been particularly harsh, with temperatures dropping below zero for weeks at a time. Into this tense environment came a series of deaths that would change everything. But first, we need to understand the Bennett family. Thomas and Mary Bennett arrived in Copper Falls in 1844, among the earliest settlers. Thomas was a mining foreman, not an owner, but a skilled worker who supervised crews and inspected tunnel safety. Mary was a school teacher, one of the few educated women in the camp. They had their first child, Samuel, in March 1844, during an unusual natural phenomenon. Multiple witnesses reported seeing aurora borealis, the northern lights, visible in Vermont for 3 consecutive nights around Samuel's birth, an extremely rare occurrence at that latitude. Their second child, Rebecca, was born in January 1846, also during an aurora event. Their third child, Jacob, was born in November 1848 during what Dr. Morrison's records describe as electromagnetic storm activity and unusual atmospheric phenomena. And their fourth child, Hope, was born in February 1850 during the most intense aurora borealis display witnessed in Vermont in the 19th century, an event so bright that newspapers as far south as New York reported being able to read by the aurora light. Mary Bennett died during Hope's delivery. She hemorrhaged and could not be saved. Dr. Morrison, who attended the birth, noted in his medical records, Mrs. Bennett delivered a healthy female child at 3:47 a.m. on February 9, 1850. The delivery was complicated by placental abruption. Despite all efforts, the patient expired at 4:12 a.m. The child, remarkably, shows no signs of distress despite the traumatic delivery. The aurora activity outside the window was the most intense I have ever witnessed. The entire sky appeared to pulse with green and violet light. Mary Bennett raised his 4 children alone for 5 years with the help of his mother, Abigail Bennett, who had followed her son to Vermont from Massachusetts. The children were, by all accounts, normal. Samuel was studious and serious. Rebecca was energetic and bold. Jacob was quiet and watchful. Hope was the baby, doted on by her siblings. But there were small signs, even then, that something was different. Abigail Bennett's private journal, discovered among Dr. Morrison's papers, contains entries that hint at unusual awareness. Samuel, at age 7, refused to play with the Thompson boy. When I asked why, he said, "He's going to get sick soon, very sick. I don't want to be near him." The Thompson boy contracted diphtheria 3 weeks later and died. Samuel was not surprised. Rebecca, at age 6, became hysterical when her father announced he would inspect the new tunnel on the South Vein. She screamed that he shouldn't go, that the rocks were wrong. Thomas went anyway. There was a minor collapse that afternoon. No one was killed, but 3 men were injured. Thomas came home shaken. These incidents were dismissed as childish intuition or coincidence. Children pick up on things adults miss. Children sense danger in ways we don't understand. But then Thomas Bennett died. On November 3, 1855, there was a catastrophic collapse in the main tunnel of the Copper Falls mine. 14 men were killed, including Thomas Bennett. It was the worst mining disaster in Vermont history up to that time. The children became orphans, and their abilities, whatever they were, became impossible to ignore. Because the night before the collapse, all 4 children had told their grandmother the same thing. "Father is going to die tomorrow, in the mine. We all see it." After Thomas Bennett's death in November 1855, the 4 Bennett children lived with their grandmother, Abigail, in a small house at the edge of Copper Falls. The mining company, out of respect for Thomas's years of service, provided a modest pension. The children were striking even then. Samuel, at 11 years old, had become the head of the family in many ways. He was tall for his age, with dark hair and dark eyes that seemed, according to multiple witnesses, to look through rather than at people. He rarely smiled. He moved with the careful, measured deliberation of someone much older. Rebecca, at 9, was his opposite, restless energy, constantly in motion, climbing trees and exploring the settlement. She had red hair, unusual in the Bennett family, and green eyes that witnesses described as bright and piercing. She seemed to notice everything: loose boards, frayed ropes, unstable rock faces. Jacob, at 7, was the quietest. Small for his age, with light brown hair and pale blue eyes, he watched people intensely. He didn't play with other children much. He preferred to sit and observe, especially when adults were drinking or arguing. Hope, at 5, was tiny and delicate. She had her mother's blonde hair and a face that Mrs. Abigail Bennett described as old beyond her years. She spoke less than her siblings, but watched the elderly residents of Copper Falls with an attention that made some of them uncomfortable. The first prediction that Dr. Morrison personally documented occurred on December 12, 1855, barely a month after their father's death. Dr. Morrison was visiting the Bennett home to check on Abigail, who had developed a persistent cough. While he was examining her, all 4 children entered the room and stood in a line, looking at him with identical, serious expressions. Samuel spoke first. "Dr. Morrison, Mr. Fletcher is going to die." Then Rebecca, "He's going to fall." Then Jacob, "But not from the fall." Then Hope, "His heart will stop." Dr. Morrison wrote in his journal that evening, "The children's pronouncement was peculiar in its precision and its distribution. Each child contributed one piece of information. When I pressed them for details, they provided the following. Samuel, I see the sickness in him. His heart is weak. Disease will kill him, even if he falls. Rebecca, I see him falling from the scaffolding at the mine, December 18th in the afternoon. Jacob, I see the fight that makes him fall. He'll push another man, then lose his balance. Hope, I see him dying. It will be peaceful. The fall will hurt him, but his heart will stop, and then there's no more pain. I asked if they were certain. All 4 nodded in unison. I asked how they knew. Samuel said, "We just know. We always know when we all see the same person." I left the Bennett home deeply unsettled. Richard Fletcher was a 47-year-old mine supervisor known for his temper and his drinking. He was in apparent good health, strong, robust, never sick. On December 18, 1855, Fletcher got into an argument with another worker on a scaffolding platform 20 feet above the mine floor. Multiple witnesses testified that Fletcher shoved the other man, then lost his balance and fell. He landed badly, breaking his left leg and several ribs. Men rushed to help him. One worker, James Mallory, later testified, "Fletcher was conscious when we got to him. He was in pain but talking, telling us how stupid he'd been. Then he just stopped. His eyes went wide, his hand went to his chest, and he collapsed. He was dead before the doctor arrived." Dr. Morrison performed the autopsy. Cause of death? Cardiac arrest. The fall had not killed him. His heart had simply stopped, likely from the shock and exertion in a man who had undiagnosed heart disease. Every detail the children had predicted was accurate. Dr. Morrison's journal entry for December 19, 1855, "I can no longer dismiss this as coincidence. The children described the method of death, fall, the cause of death, heart failure, the circumstance, violence/argument, and even the peaceful nature of the final moments. Each child provided information from what appears to be their particular domain of knowledge. I must investigate further. I am a man of science. I do not believe in prophecy, yet I cannot ignore data simply because it contradicts my beliefs." The second prediction came 2 weeks later, in early January 1856. The second prediction occurred on January 8, 1856. Dr. Morrison was called to the Bennett home late at night. Abigail Bennett sent word that the children were having another episode and needed him to witness it. When he arrived, he found all 4 children sitting at the kitchen table, staring straight ahead, their eyes unfocused. Abigail stood in the doorway, visibly shaken. "They've been like this for 20 minutes, she whispered. Then they started talking, one after another, like they'd rehearsed it. As Dr. Morrison watched, the children began to speak again. Samuel, Mrs. Whitmore will die on January 15th. Rebecca, no accident will kill her. Jacob, no violence will harm her. Hope, she will die in her sleep. Her heart will simply stop. She is old. It is time. Dr. Morrison asked them how they knew. The children turned to look at him, still in perfect unison. Samuel spoke for all of them. "We each see a different kind of death, Dr. Morrison. I see sickness eating people from inside. Rebecca sees the world breaking them from outside. Jacob sees people hurting each other. Hope sees time running out. When we all agree that death is coming, it comes. When we disagree, the person lives." "And you all agree about Mrs. Whitmore?" All 4 children nodded. Sarah Whitmore was 73 years old, the widow of one of Copper Falls' first settlers. She was in generally good health for her age, no obvious illness, still mobile, still sharp of mind. On the night of January 15, 1856, Sarah Whitmore went to bed as usual. Her daughter, Elizabeth Hayes, found her dead the following morning. She appeared peaceful, lying on her back with her hands folded over her chest, as if she had arranged herself for death. Dr. Morrison examined the body. No signs of violence, no signs of disease, no signs of accident. She had simply died in her sleep, likely from heart failure, what doctors of the era called death from natural causes. Hope's domain. Dr. Morrison began keeping detailed records. He interviewed the children separately, testing their abilities, trying to understand the boundaries of what they could do. What he discovered was remarkable. Samuel could describe illnesses he had never seen or studied. When shown medical texts, he could identify diseases from symptoms with accuracy that shocked Dr. Morrison. He claimed he could see sickness like colored smoke inside people, dark colors for serious illness, pale colors for minor ailments. Rebecca could sense structural weaknesses and instabilities. She could look at a mine tunnel or a building and point out where collapses might occur. She claimed she could see the future breaking the present, visualizing how objects and structures would fail. Jacob could sense anger and violent intent in others. He could predict fights, confrontations, and murders by observing people's behavior and emotional states. He claimed he could see the darkness that makes people hurt each other. Hope could sense when elderly or terminally ill people were approaching death. She claimed she could see the light getting dim in people who are ready to go. But here was the crucial pattern Dr. Morrison discovered. The children were only accurate when they all agreed. When Samuel said someone would die of disease, but Rebecca, Jacob, and Hope said they saw no death coming through their domains, the person didn't die. When Rebecca predicted an accident, but Samuel saw no disease, Jacob saw no violence, and Hope saw no natural death approaching, the person survived the accident. The children appeared to be 4 parts of a single predictive mechanism. Each saw one piece of the puzzle. Only when all 4 pieces aligned, when all 4 children agreed that death was coming, did the prediction come true. Dr. Morrison's February 1856 journal entry captures his growing amazement. "I have tested the children extensively over the past 6 weeks. I have witnessed 12 predictions. In 9 cases, all 4 children agreed that death was imminent. In those 9 cases, death occurred exactly as predicted. 6 from disease, Samuel's domain, 2 from accidents, Rebecca's domain, 1 from natural causes, Hope's domain. In 3 cases, only 1 or 2 children predicted death, while the others saw nothing. In all 3 of those cases, the person survived." The children are not simply psychic, they are specialists. They are components of a distributed system, each processing one type of information, combining their observations to form a complete picture. This is unprecedented in medical literature. I can find no comparable case. I must document this thoroughly, for it challenges our fundamental understanding of consciousness and perception. But Dr. Morrison's careful documentation was about to become far more urgent, because the children had just made their most detailed and most disturbing prediction yet, and this one involved mass death. By March of 1856, the Bennett children had made 23 predictions. 23 predictions where all 4 children agreed. 23 deaths that occurred exactly as described. The accuracy rate was absolute, 100%. Dr. Morrison began conducting formal experiments to understand the mechanisms of the children's abilities. On March 14, 1856, Dr. Morrison arranged for the children to be separated into 4 different locations during a prediction episode. Samuel stayed at the Bennett home. Rebecca was brought to Dr. Morrison's office, a quarter-mile away. Jacob stayed with the school teacher, Mrs. Bradshaw, half a mile away. Hope was with Mrs. Hayes at the general store, nearly a mile distant. Each location had adult witnesses with synchronized pocket watches and notebooks. At 7 p.m., all 4 children simultaneously stopped what they were doing and began speaking. The witnesses later compared notes. At the Bennett home, Samuel said, "Someone will die of lung fever, March 21st, afternoon." At Dr. Morrison's office, Rebecca said, "No accident will kill them." At the schoolhouse, Jacob said, "No violence will harm them." At the general store, Hope said, "Not old age, not natural, they are young." The predictions, given simultaneously at 4 different locations with no possibility of communication, aligned perfectly. A young miner named Patrick Sullivan died on March 21, 1856 at 3:30 p.m. from pneumonia, lung fever. He was 24 years old, too young for natural death, yet killed by disease, not accident or violence. Dr. Morrison's conclusion: the children's ability to predict does not require proximity to each other. Whatever mechanism connects them operates across distance. This suggests a form of consciousness that is distributed but unified, a single awareness expressed through 4 separate bodies. Dr. Morrison's most detailed experiment occurred on April 3, 1856, when all 4 children were present at his office during a prediction episode. He had assembled medical instruments, a stethoscope for each child, thermometers, pulse measurement equipment, a primitive electrical detector, notebooks for recording observations. At approximately 6:30 p.m., all 4 children simultaneously became very still. Their eyes lost focus, their breathing synchronized. Dr. Morrison and his assistant, a medical student from Boston named Henry Fletcher, took measurements. All 4 children's heart rates slowed simultaneously from approximately 85 beats per minute to 52 beats per minute. Their breathing synchronized, 6 breaths per minute, perfectly aligned. Their body temperatures all dropped from normal 98.6 degrees F to 95.8 degrees F, nearly 3 degrees below normal. Most remarkably, when Dr. Morrison observed them closely, he noticed their pupils dilating and contracting in perfect unison despite being in a well-lit room. Then they began to speak. Not one after another as they usually did, but in a strange overlapping pattern, each child speaking their piece, but the words flowing together as if spoken by a single voice. Samuel, John Marcus. Rebecca, will die. Jacob, on April 9th, in the evening. Hope, from consumption. Samuel, he will collapse. Rebecca, no one will hurt him. Jacob, he is only 32. All 4 children, he is already dying. The sickness is too far. Dr. Morrison wrote in his notes, "The children spoke in a cascade, their words interlocking like the pieces of a puzzle. When I asked them to repeat the prediction individually, each child could only remember their piece. Samuel remembered predicting consumption. Rebecca remembered saying he would collapse. Jacob remembered saying no one would hurt him. Hope remembered his age. It was as if the complete prediction existed in a space between them, accessible only when they were all focused together." John Marcus, a mine engineer, collapsed on April 9, 1856 at approximately 8 p.m., where he was taken to Dr. Morrison's office, where he died 3 hours later from advanced tuberculosis. He was 32 years old. But Dr. Morrison also documented something equally important. What happened when the children disagreed? On April 27, 1856, the children made conflicting predictions about a man named William Ross. Samuel saw disease. He has infection in his blood. He will die within days. But Rebecca, Jacob, and Hope saw nothing, no accident approaching, no violence, no natural death. William Ross was injured in a minor mining accident that week, a cut on his arm from a piece of sharp ore. The cut became infected. Ross developed a fever. Dr. Morrison treated him with standard care for the time, cleaning the wound, applying poultices, monitoring for sepsis. Ross survived. The infection cleared. He lived another 30 years. Samuel had been wrong, but only because he had been alone in his prediction. Dr. Morrison wrote, "The children are not infallible. They are only accurate when they all concur." Samuel saw true infection. The wound was indeed infected, but infection does not always lead to death. Without the confirmation from his siblings, without Rebecca sensing no accident, Jacob sensing no violence, and Hope sensing he was not ready for natural death, Samuel's prediction alone was insufficient. This suggests that the children are not simply seeing the future, they are calculating probability. They are assessing multiple factors simultaneously, each from their unique perspective, and only when all factors align towards death do they predict it with certainty. In other words, they are not prophets, they are probability engines, 4 separate processors working in parallel, combining their outputs to generate predictions of extraordinary accuracy. But Dr. Morrison's theories were about to be tested in the most dramatic way possible. Because in December of 1856, all 4 children would make a prediction that would save dozens of lives and prove their abilities beyond any doubt. Winter came early to Copper Falls in 1856. By November, snow had already piled 3 feet deep in the mountain passes. The mine was pushing deeper than ever, chasing copper veins into increasingly unstable rock. The owners were desperate. The easy ore was gone, and they needed to extract as much as possible before the mine became unprofitable. Safety inspections were rushed. Support timbers were spaced farther apart to save money. Blasting was done with less care. The miners knew the conditions were dangerous, but they also knew that come spring, when the copper ran out, they would all be unemployed. So they kept working. On December 14, 1856, all 4 Bennett children walked into Dr. Morrison's office together, accompanied by their grandmother. Abigail Bennett looked shaken. "Doctor, they've been like this since yesterday evening. They won't eat, they barely sleep, they keep saying the same thing over and over. I thought you should hear it." Dr. Morrison brought the children into his examination room. They sat in a row, holding hands, staring at nothing. Then they spoke, and what they described would prove to be the most detailed, most specific, and most consequential prediction they had ever made. Samuel, the main tunnel will collapse December 22nd, 2:30 in the afternoon. Rebecca, the support timbers at Section 7 are cracked. The ceiling will fall first there, then spread. 11 men will be in the collapse zone. Jacob, 4 men will fight to escape. 2 will push others out of the way trying to reach the exit. There will be violence in the panic. Hope, 2 men are already sick with lung disease. The dust and smoke will kill them even if they survive the collapse. Samuel, 3 men will suffocate. The air will run out. Rebecca, 4 men will be crushed by falling rock. They will die instantly. Jacob, 2 men will kill each other, fighting over the last air pocket. Hope, 2 men are old. Their hearts will fail from the shock and fear. All 4 children speaking in unison. 11 men will die if you don't stop it. Section 7, December 22nd, 2:30. We see all of them dying. We see all the ways they will die. Then the children collapsed, unconscious. Dr. Morrison's hands were shaking as he wrote down everything they had said. This was not a simple prediction of a single death. This was a complete disaster scenario. The location, the time, the number of victims, the specific causes of each death. Disease, accident, violence, natural causes. All 4 types, all four children seeing their domains intersect in a single catastrophic event. Dr. Morrison immediately took the prediction to the mine owners. The mine superintendent, Charles Aldrich, laughed in his face. "You want me to close the mine based on the ravings of 4 orphan children? Dr. Morrison, I respected you as a man of science, but this is nonsense." Dr. Morrison showed him the documentation, the 23 previous predictions, all verified, all accurate. Aldrich dismissed it. Coincidence, lucky guesses, or the children overhear talk of sick men and dying men and make predictions that sound specific but are really just probability. In a mining camp, people die. It's not prophecy to predict that. But the specificity is meaningless. I will not close the mine 3 days before Christmas and lose thousands of dollars because 4 children claim to see ghosts or visions or whatever this is. If you continue to spread this panic, I'll have you removed from the camp. Dr. Morrison tried the workers next. He went to the miners' boarding houses and warned them. Some believed him. They had heard about the Bennett children, had seen their predictions come true. But most were skeptical or couldn't afford to miss work so close to Christmas. 2 miners did listen, Michael O'Sullivan and Thomas Chen. Both men asked to be reassigned to different sections of the mine on December 22nd. Their requests were denied. All hands were needed in the deep tunnel. Dr. Morrison spent the next week trying to convince anyone who would listen. He wrote letters to the mining company's owners in Boston. He contacted the territorial authorities. He even considered dynamiting the tunnel entrance himself to force an evacuation. But he had no authority, no power. He was a doctor in a mining camp, and the mine owners had all the control. December 22nd, 1856, dawned cold and clear. At 2 p.m. on December 22nd, 43 miners were working in the deep tunnel of the Copper Falls mine. 12 men were in Section 7, the exact section Rebecca had identified as having cracked timbers. At the Bennett home, all 4 children began screaming. Abigail Bennett would later testify. They screamed as if they themselves were dying. Samuel clutched his chest and gasped that he couldn't breathe. Rebecca cried out about rocks falling. Jacob cowered and yelled about men fighting. Hope wept and said the old men's hearts were stopping. They were experiencing the deaths they had foreseen, feeling them happen, even though we were a mile from the mine. At 2:28 p.m., a miner named Patrick Walsh was setting a blast charge in Section 7 when he noticed something wrong. A support timber was cracked, not just cracked, but actively splintering, making sounds like gunfire as the wood fibers tore under the weight of thousands of tons of rock above. Walsh shouted for the men to evacuate. Some ran, others hesitated, not believing the danger was imminent. At 2:31 p.m., 1 minute after the children's predicted time, the timber failed. The ceiling of Section 7 collapsed. Tons of rock fell in seconds, filling the tunnel with dust and debris. Men screamed. Some ran toward the exit. Others were trapped instantly. The collapse triggered a secondary failure. The ceiling of Section 8, directly adjacent, also fell. The exit tunnel partially collapsed, trapping everyone who hadn't already escaped. When the dust settled, Dr. Morrison rushed to the mine with his medical kit. 32 men had escaped. They were injured, terrified, but alive. 11 men were trapped below. Rescue efforts began immediately. Miners dug frantically, trying to clear the debris, trying to reach the trapped men before their air ran out. It took 16 hours. When they finally broke through, they found 11 bodies. Dr. Morrison examined each one and documented the cause of death. Thomas Brody, crushed by falling rock, death instantaneous. Sean Murphy, crushed by support timber, death instantaneous. James Wilson, crushed beneath ore cart, knocked loose by collapse, death instantaneous. Patrick Walsh, the man who had tried to warn everyone, crushed by secondary collapse, death instantaneous. Henry Lai, suffocated when air pocket collapsed. Peter Kowalski, suffocated, lungs filled with dust. Michael O'Sullivan, one of the men who had tried to get reassigned, died from dust inhalation. He had pre-existing lung disease that made him especially vulnerable. Robert Mackenzie, beaten to death by Andrew Foster during fight over access to a small air pocket. Andrew Foster himself killed when Mackenzie fought back before dying. Charles Anderson, age 58, heart attack from shock and stress. Wilhelm Schneider, age 61, heart attack while trapped, pre-existing heart condition. 11 men dead. Exactly 4 from accident, 3 from suffocation, 2 from violence, 2 from natural causes. Exactly as the children had predicted, exactly in the proportions they had described. Dr. Morrison's report, written that night, is one of the most haunting documents in the entire file. Every detail was accurate. The location, Section 7, the time, within 3 minutes of 2:30 p.m., the number of victims, 11 men, the causes of death distributed across all 4 categories the children had described. I tried to prevent this. I warned everyone who would listen, but I was not believed. The children knew. They saw it coming. They described it in perfect detail 8 days before it occurred, and I could not save those men. The Bennett children were found unconscious in their home that evening. All 4 collapsed on the floor, holding each other. They did not wake for 3 days. When they finally opened their eyes, they refused to speak about what they had experienced. But the community of Copper Falls would never be the same. The mine disaster changed everything. Dr. Nathaniel Morrison was no longer a lone voice documenting an impossible phenomenon. The entire community of Copper Falls had witnessed a prediction come true with devastating accuracy. 11 men were dead, men who might have lived if anyone had believed 4 orphaned children. In the weeks following the disaster, Dr. Morrison received correspondence from several prominent medical institutions. Word had spread about the Bennett case through letters he'd sent before the collapse. Now, with such dramatic proof, the medical establishment wanted answers. On January 15, 1857, Professor Thomas Hartwell arrived from Yale Medical School. Professor Hartwell was 53 years old, a specialist in neurology and mental diseases, and one of the most respected physicians in New England. He was also a committed skeptic. He had spent 15 years debunking spiritualists, faith healers, and supposed psychics. He came to Copper Falls expecting to expose a fraud. He left 6 weeks later with his worldview shattered. Dr. Morrison's journal entry for January 16, 1857. Professor Hartwell examined all 4 children today. He conducted the most rigorous testing I have ever witnessed. He separated them, questioned them individually, examined their eyes, ears, reflexes, and mental faculties. He measured their heads with calipers, phrenological examination. He tested their pulse and respiration during rest and during prediction episodes. His conclusion, after 12 hours of examination: these children are physically normal. Their brains show no abnormal development. Their sensory capabilities are typical for their ages, yet they demonstrate an ability that should not exist. He has asked to stay in Copper Falls for an extended study. Over the next 6 weeks, Professor Hartwell conducted a series of experiments that would be documented in a confidential report to Yale, a report that Dr. Morrison would later include in the sealed trunk. January 20th through 25th, 1857. Professor Hartwell arranged for the 4 children to be separated into 4 different homes, each at least 2 miles apart. They were supervised constantly by trusted community members who had been instructed to prevent any communication. For 5 days, the children were kept apart. During that time, 3 people died in Copper Falls. Martha Henderson, age 71, died of pneumonia. David Park, age 34, died in a mill accident. Thomas Reed, aged 48, died of heart failure. None of the children predicted any of these deaths. When questioned afterward, each child said the same thing: "We couldn't see anything. We were alone." On January 25th, the children were reunited. Within 2 hours, they made their first prediction in 5 days. James Morgan would die on January 30th from an infected wound, disease, sustained in a fall from scaffolding, accident, occurring during an argument, violence, complicated by his advanced age and weak heart, natural causes. James Morgan died exactly as predicted. Professor Hartwell's conclusion: the children's predictive ability requires proximity to one another. Separated, they are blind. Together, they see with perfect clarity. This suggests a form of linked consciousness that is unprecedented in medical literature. February 3, 1857. Professor Hartwell wanted to determine if the children's predictions could be influenced by suggestion or false information. He told Samuel that a man named Robert Klein was gravely ill with typhoid fever, a lie. Klein was healthy. He told Rebecca that Klein had been involved in a serious accident, also false. He told Jacob that Klein was planning violence, false. He told Hope that Klein was 70 years old and dying. Klein was 42 and healthy. Then he brought all 4 children together and asked if Robert Klein was going to die. All 4 children immediately said no. Samuel: "He's not sick. You lied to me." Rebecca: "There's no accident coming for him. You lied." Jacob: "He's not planning to hurt anyone. You lied." Hope: "She is too young. She's not ready. You lied." The children could not be misled. Their ability operated independent of suggestion or false information. February 10, 1857. This was Professor Hartwell's most disturbing experiment. Disturbing because of what it revealed about the nature of the children's ability. He asked the children, "Can you predict who will die next?" The children looked at each other, then nodded. Samuel: "Mrs. Crawford, disease." Rebecca: "Not accident." Jacob: "Not violence." Hope: "She is old." February 18th. Professor Hartwell had them sign and date their prediction. Multiple witnesses were present. Eleanor Crawford was 68 years old in seemingly good health. She had no serious illnesses, no indication that death was imminent. On February 17th, 1 day before the prediction, Mrs. Crawford complained of chest pain. Dr. Morrison examined her and found signs of heart disease that had gone undetected. She died peacefully in her sleep on the night of February 18th. Professor Hartwell's notes capture his growing unease. The children do not need a specific target. They can simply look at the future and see who will die next. This suggests they are not reading current conditions in people. They are somehow accessing information about future events. The mechanism remains completely unknown. February 14th, 1857. This was the experiment that convinced Professor Hartwell that something genuinely anomalous was occurring, something that could not be explained by coincidence, observation, or even unconscious perception of physical symptoms. He assembled the children in Dr. Morrison's office and attached primitive electrical sensors to their temples, copper wires connected to a galvanometer, a device that could detect small electrical currents. He asked them to make a prediction. At 6:47 p.m.,
all four children went still simultaneously. Their pupils dilated in unison, their breathing synchronized, and the galvanometer went wild. Professor Hartwell's report describes what happened. The needle on the galvanometer, which had been showing normal baseline readings, suddenly deflected to maximum scale. All four children showed simultaneous massive electrical activity, far beyond anything I have measured in normal subjects. The electrical pulses occurred in waves, synchronized across all four children, as if a single electrical signal was passing through four separate brains.
Most remarkably, when I tested the children individually, separating them and attempting to induce prediction states, the electrical activity disappeared entirely. Only when all four were together and focused did the anomalous readings appear. This suggests that the children's brains are somehow synchronizing during prediction episodes, communicating or linking in a way that generates measurable electromagnetic activity. The mechanism is unknown. The implications are profound. Professor Hartwell documented what he called perfect synchronization during prediction episodes. All four children's heart rates synchronized to within 2 beats per minute. Breathing patterns aligned exactly. Same depth, same rhythm. Pupils expanded and contracted in perfect unison. All four children's temperatures dropped by 2 to 3 degrees during predictions. Electrical measurements showed synchronized wave patterns. Most remarkably, when one child was stimulated during a prediction episode, Professor Hartwell pricked Rebecca's finger with a needle. All four children flinched simultaneously, even though they were seated apart and couldn't see each other. They were experiencing each other's sensations. Professor Hartwell's final conclusion, written in his confidential report to Yale. After 6 weeks of intensive study, I can state the following with certainty. 1. The Bennett children's predictive abilities are genuine. They are not fraud, not coincidence, not unconscious observation. 2. The children's accuracy when all four concur is absolute. In 38 documented predictions where all four agreed, 38 deaths occurred exactly as described. 3. The children's abilities appear to result from some form of synchronized consciousness, 4 separate brains functioning as a single predictive system. The mechanism is unknown. The implications are profound. 4. The mechanism is completely unknown to current medical science. 5. I recommend this case be classified and sealed. The implications are too profound and too disturbing for public knowledge. If the existence of such abilities became widely known, these children would never know peace. They would be studied, exploited, and possibly harmed. 6. I further recommend that the children be separated permanently. Their ability appears to require proximity. Separated, they cannot predict. Together, they will be hunted by those who wish to use their abilities for profit or power. This is the most extraordinary medical case I have encountered in 30 years of practice. It is also the most troubling. These children see death approaching with perfect clarity. They carry a burden no child should bear. May God have mercy on them. Professor Hartwell left Copper Falls on February 28, 1857. He never published his findings. The report remained sealed at Yale for over 150 years. But before he left, he had one final conversation with Dr. Morrison, a conversation that Morrison recorded in his journal. Professor Hartwell said, "I asked you to explain what these children can do. I cannot. But I will tell you what I believe. Consciousness is not confined to individual brains. Under certain circumstances, circumstances we do not yet understand, consciousness can distribute itself across multiple minds, creating a unified awareness that is greater than the sum of its parts. The Bennett children are four pieces of a single consciousness. Separately, they are incomplete. Together, they become something else, something that can perceive patterns in time, patterns that lead to death. This is not magic. This is not supernatural. This is a natural phenomenon we simply do not yet have the science to understand. Someday, perhaps in 100 years, we will. Until then, these children must be protected from a world that will not understand them. 3 weeks later, the community of Copper Falls made a decision that would separate the Bennett children forever. In the weeks following Professor Hartwell's departure, Copper Falls descended into fear and conflict. Some residents saw the Bennett children as blessed, gifted by God with the ability to warn of coming death. They wanted to protect the children, to use their abilities to save lives. Others saw them as cursed, harbingers of death, whose very presence brought misfortune. They wanted the children removed from the community, institutionalized, or worse. The mine owners, already facing potential lawsuits from the families of the 11 men who died in the December collapse, wanted the children silenced. Their accurate prediction was proof that the mine had been operating under dangerous conditions, proof that could cost the company millions. Dr. Morrison's journal entries from March 1857 paint a picture of a community tearing itself apart. March 8th. Mrs. Bradley threw stones at Hope Bennett today when the child walked past her home. She screamed that Hope had predicted her husband's death and made it happen. This is madness. The children do not cause death, they merely see it coming. March 12th. A delegation of miners came to my office demanding I cure the children or remove their abilities. How does one cure a gift? How does one remove an ability that exists beyond the boundaries of current medical knowledge? March 19th. Abigail Bennett came to see me tonight. She is terrified. Someone painted the words "death children" on her front door. She begs me to help her protect her grandchildren. On March 25, 1857, the entire community of Copper Falls gathered at the church for a meeting to decide the children's fate. Testimony from that meeting survives in the records of the Copper Falls Mining Company, which kept minutes of all significant community events. Arguments for protecting the children. Reverend William Ashton. These children are innocent of any wrongdoing. They did not ask for this burden. They warned us of the mine collapse. They tried to save lives. To punish them for seeing what we refuse to believe is unconscionable. Dr. Morrison. I have studied these children for over a year. Their abilities are real, documented, and beyond medical explanation. But they are not dangerous. They do not cause death. They predict it. There is a profound difference. Arguments for removing the children. Charles Aldrich, mine superintendent. These children create panic and disruption. Workers refuse to enter sections the children claim are dangerous. Production has fallen by 30% since the December incident. This community cannot function with 4 Oracle children spreading fear. Mrs. Margaret Bradley, widow of Michael Bradley, who died of heart failure 3 weeks earlier, a death Hope had predicted. My husband was healthy until that child looked at him and said he would die. 1 week later, he was dead. You cannot tell me there is no connection. These children bring death. Thomas Reed, town elder. For the good of the community, and perhaps for the good of the children themselves, they should be separated. Send them to different families in different towns. Apart, according to Dr. Morrison's own observations, they cannot predict. Apart, they can live normal lives. The vote was close. 47 in favor of separation, 38 against, 12 abstaining. The Bennett children would be separated. On April 10, 1857, 4 families from surrounding communities agreed to take one Bennett child each. Samuel, age 12, was sent to a farming family in Montpelier, Vermont, 75 miles north. Rebecca, age 10, was sent to a merchant family in Manchester, Vermont, 60 miles south. Jacob, age 8, was sent to a doctor's family in Burlington, Vermont, 90 miles northwest. Hope, age 6, was sent to a school teacher's family in Brattleboro, Vermont, 100 miles southeast. The children were separated by distances that made communication effectively impossible. There were no telephones, no rapid transportation. Letters took days or weeks. Visits would be rare if they occurred at all. Dr. Morrison documented the separation. April 10, 1857, the saddest day of my medical career. I watched as 4 children who share a single consciousness were torn apart and sent to separate corners of Vermont. They did not cry, they did not protest. They held hands in the wagon until the last possible moment, then let go silently as they were taken to their separate destinations. Abigail Bennett collapsed. She has lost her son, her daughter-in-law, and now her grandchildren. She is broken. I do not know if this was the right decision. I know only that it was the decision the community made out of fear. For 3 years, the children lived apart. And for 3 years, there were no predictions, no warnings, no impossible knowledge. Separated, the children were normal. In June 1860, Abigail Bennett, now 73 years old and in failing health, requested that her grandchildren be allowed to visit her one final time. The families who had taken the children agreed. They had all reported that the children were well-behaved, quiet, and showed no signs of unusual abilities. Surely a brief visit would cause no harm. On June 15, 1860, all 4 Bennett children were reunited at their grandmother's house in Copper Falls. The mine had closed in 1858. Only about 50 residents remained. Dr. Morrison was present. He documented what happened. The children saw each other for the first time in 3 years. They ran to each other and embraced, weeping. Then they stood in a line holding hands, and their eyes lost focus. Within 5 minutes, they made a prediction. Samuel, Mrs. Henderson will die. Rebecca, she will fall down the stairs. Jacob, no one will push her. It will be an accident. Hope, June 22nd. Her heart will stop after she falls. The ability had not disappeared. It had merely been dormant. Bring the children together and the synchronization returns immediately. Mrs. Sarah Henderson, age 76, died on June 22, 1618, exactly as predicted. She fell down the stairs of her home and her heart stopped from the shock of the fall. The families that had taken the children were horrified. They demanded the children be separated immediately. But something had changed. The children refused. Samuel, now 15 years old and the eldest, spoke for all of them. We will not be separated again. We have lived 3 years half alive, cut off from each other, incomplete. We are not 4 children. We are one consciousness in 4 bodies. To separate us is to cut us into pieces. We did not ask for this ability. We did not choose it, but it is what we are. We will not deny it anymore. The families contacted authorities. There was talk of committing the children to an asylum, of legal proceedings to force compliance. But before any action could be taken, the Bennett children disappeared. On the night of June 30th, 1860, all 4 Bennett children vanished from Copper Falls. No one saw them leave, no witnesses, no trail. Abigail Bennett's journal entry for July 1st, 1860. They came to say goodbye last night. They told me they were leaving, that they had to stay together, that they would find a place where they could live in peace.
I begged them to stay. I am old. I will die soon. I wanted to be with them at the end. Samuel said, "Grandmother, we already know when you will die, October 12th, 1860. Your heart will simply stop in your sleep. It will be peaceful. We will not be here to see it, but we see it now, and it is a good death." They kissed me goodbye and left.
I will never see them again. Abigail Bennett died on October 12, 1860, exactly as predicted. Authorities searched for the Bennett children for months. Descriptions were circulated. Rewards were offered. There were reported sightings. 4 children matching their description seen in Boston, August 1860. 4 children boarding a ship to Europe, September 1860. 4 children living in a remote cabin in New Hampshire, November 1860. None of the sightings were confirmed. The children had effectively vanished. Over the next decade, occasional reports surfaced. 1863, a Union Army doctor reported treating 4 adolescent siblings who demonstrated unusual medical knowledge during the Battle of Gettysburg. The siblings disappeared before he could learn their names. 1867, a journalist in Chicago reported encountering 4 young adults who accurately predicted a factory fire 3 days before it occurred. They refused to give their names and disappeared when authorities arrived to question them. 1872, a ship's captain reported that 4 passengers, siblings in their 20s, predicted a storm that would have sunk the ship. Their warning allowed the captain to change course. When he went to thank them after arriving safely in port, they were gone. Were these the Bennett children, or were they other people with similar abilities? There was no way to confirm. The last confirmed record of the Bennett children comes from Dr. Morrison's own journal. On November 15, 1872, Dr. Morrison, now 73 years old and dying of cancer, received a letter with no return address. The letter contained 4 signatures: Samuel, Rebecca, Jacob, and Hope. The message was brief. "Dear Dr. Morrison, we are well. We are together. We have found peace. We saw your death coming months ago, December 3rd, 1872. Your cancer will finally take you. It will be peaceful. You will die in your sleep, dreaming of your wife. Thank you for trying to protect us. Thank you for documenting our story. Someday, perhaps, science will understand what we are. We remain, as always, 4 pieces of one whole. The Bennetts." Dr. Nathaniel Morrison died on December 3, 1872, exactly as predicted. After his death, his executor, a colleague from Boston, found detailed instructions to seal all documents related to the Bennett case in a trunk and not open it for 100 years. "Let time and science decide if the world is ready to know what I have documented," Morrison wrote in his final letter. And so the trunk was sealed, marked with Morrison's death date, 1897, and instructions not to open until 1997. It would not be opened until 2009, 112 years later, when Dr. Eleanor Hayes found it in the University of Vermont archives. The Bennett children were never seen again. When Dr. Eleanor Hayes opened Dr. Morrison's sealed trunk in March 2009, she expected to find routine medical records from a forgotten mining town. What she found instead would consume the next 5 years of her life. The trunk contained 38 death certificates, all marked with predictions, Dr. Morrison's Complete Journals, 1852 to 1872. Professor Hartwell's confidential Yale report. Witness testimonies signed by over 60 residents of Copper Falls. Letters, medical examinations, experimental data, photographs, one daguerreotype of 4 children, faces slightly blurred. A final letter from the Bennett children to Dr. Morrison. Dr. Hayes's initial reaction recorded in her own research notes. At first, I thought this had to be an elaborate hoax, perhaps a 19th century novel presented as documentary evidence. But as I examined the materials, I realized everything was authentic. The paper was period correct. The handwriting matched other verified documents from Dr. Morrison. The death certificates were cross-referenced with Vermont state records. Every single death occurred exactly as documented. This was real. Or someone in the 1850s created the most elaborate hoax in medical history for no apparent reason, then sealed it for a century, which seemed far less likely. Dr. Hayes contacted colleagues, Dr. Michael Chang, neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Sarah Berkowitz, historian specializing in 19th century medicine, and Dr. James Peterson, parapsychologist at the Rhine Research Center. Together, they formed an informal research team to investigate the Bennett case. Over the next 2 years, 2009 to 2011, the team verified every checkable fact in Dr. Morrison's documentation. All 38 deaths were confirmed through Vermont state records, cemetery records, and newspaper archives. Every single death occurred on the date predicted, with causes matching the predictions. Many of the 60-plus witnesses who signed testimonies could be traced through census records and genealogical databases. They were real people who lived in Copper Falls during the 1850s. Harvard Medical School confirmed that Nathaniel Morrison graduated in '48, studied under Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., and practiced in Vermont from 1852 until his death in 1872. Yale confirmed that Thomas Hartwell was a professor of neurology and mental diseases from 1845 to 1870. His confidential report matched his writing style in other documents. The December 22, 1956 collapse was documented in contemporary newspapers, including the Rutland Herald. 11 men died, exactly as predicted. The names matched the Bennett children's predictions. Every verifiable fact checked out. In 2011, Dr. Hayes and her team decided to search for living descendants of the Bennett family. Genealogical research revealed Thomas and Mary Bennett had distant relatives still living in Massachusetts. DNA samples were collected from 3 individuals who were confirmed great-great-great-grandchildren of Thomas Bennett's brother. The team was searching for genetic markers that might explain the children's abilities. What they found was unexpected. All 3 descendants carried an unusual genetic variant on chromosome 19, a mutation in a gene cluster associated with neural synchronization and sensory processing. The mutation was extremely rare, appearing in less than 0.1% of the population. But here's what was most significant. The genetic variant the Bennett descendants carry appears to affect how neurons synchronize their firing patterns. In a single individual, the effect is negligible, just slightly enhanced pattern recognition, perhaps. But if multiple individuals with this variant are in close proximity, especially if they're siblings who shared prenatal environment, the effect may amplify exponentially. Their brains may begin to synchronize, to link up, to function as a distributed network. The aurora borealis activity during the Bennett children's births may have been a contributing factor. Strong electromagnetic fields during critical periods of brain development can alter neural pathways. Combined with this genetic variant, it's possible, just possible, that the perfect storm of factors created 4 children whose brains could literally link up and function as one. It was a theory, not proof, but it was a scientific framework for understanding what Morrison and Hartwell had documented. Meanwhile, Dr. Berkowitz, the historian, was trying to trace what happened to the Bennett children after they disappeared in 1860. She found tantalizing hints. 1863, Gettysburg Field Hospital report mentioned 4 adolescent volunteers, siblings, who demonstrated uncanny ability to predict which wounded soldiers would survive and which would die. Medical staff reported their assessments were invariably correct. 1867, Chicago Tribune article about 4 mysterious prophets who warned of a warehouse fire. The warning was ignored, 23 people died. 1872, ship's log from the SS Carolina Atlantic crossing mentions 4 passengers, adult siblings, who warned captain of coming storm. Captain heeded warning, altered course, storm struck exactly where we would have been. 1889, San Francisco Chronicle brief mention of 4 individuals with silver hair who appeared to be in their 40s but claimed to be 60 years old, demonstrated ability to predict earthquakes. They left San Francisco 3 days before a minor earthquake struck. Were these the Bennett children? The ages roughly matched, 4 siblings, predictive abilities, consistent pattern. But there were no names, no photographs, no definitive proof. Dr. Peterson's research uncovered something else. The Bennett case was not unique. Between 1850 and 1900, there were at least 47 documented cases of individuals or sibling groups demonstrating similar abilities. Predicting deaths with unusual accuracy, demonstrating specialized types of precognition, showing evidence of synchronized consciousness in sibling groups. Most cases were poorly documented, but a few had detailed medical records. The Morrison twins, Kentucky, 1863, twin girls who could sense when buildings were structurally unsound, predicted 3 building collapses with perfect accuracy before disappearing. The Chen children, California, 1878, 3 siblings who could predict earthquakes, documented by Stanford geologists as having 87% accuracy on earthquake predictions. The Whitmore sisters, Massachusetts, 1856, 2 sisters who could diagnose diseases by touch. Medical examination confirmed abilities. Sisters were institutionalized and died in an asylum in 1867. A pattern emerged. Most cases involved siblings, twins, or multiple children from the same parents. Many were born during unusual electromagnetic events, auroras, or storms. Abilities often manifested in childhood, ages 5 to 12. Abilities appeared to require proximity between siblings. When separated, abilities diminished or disappeared. Most individuals either disappeared or were institutionalized. The phenomenon appeared to be genetic, environmental, and social, a perfect storm of factors that produced rare individuals with extraordinary capabilities. And then society either destroyed them or drove them into hiding. Dr. Hayes's final report, published in the Journal of Anomalous Phenomena in 2014, concluded, "The Bennett case represents the most thoroughly documented instance of precognitive ability in medical literature. Unlike most paranormal claims, this case features multiple independent witnesses, 60 signed testimonies, detailed medical examinations by licensed physicians, court-quality evidence, death certificates, official records, perfect accuracy rate, 38 out of 38 predictions verified, scientific investigation by credible researchers, Morrison and Hartwell, physical evidence that survives to present day, no evidence of fraud ever discovered." Modern neuroscience suggests a possible mechanism, distributed consciousness arising from synchronized brain activity in genetically related individuals, possibly triggered by electromagnetic exposure during critical developmental periods. However, we must acknowledge that despite our advances, we still cannot fully explain what the Bennett children could do. Their abilities remain at the edge of scientific understanding. The most profound question is not whether the Bennett children's abilities were real, the evidence for that is overwhelming, but rather what happened to them. Did they live normal lives under assumed names? Did their abilities fade with age? Or do their descendants still carry the genetic markers that might, under the right circumstances, express themselves again? We may never know. But the Bennett case serves as a reminder that human consciousness and perception may be far stranger and more complex than we currently understand. The 3 descendants tested in 2011 reported no unusual abilities, but genetic analysis suggested the variant might require multiple carriers in close proximity to express. In other words, single descendants would be normal, but if 2 descendants with the variant had children together, the research team chose not to publish the descendants' identities or the specific genetic markers. The potential for exploitation was too great. As Dr. Hayes wrote in her final notes, if the Bennett bloodline still exists, and if the genetic factors that created their abilities could be replicated, those individuals deserve privacy and protection. The 19th century drove the Bennett children into hiding through fear and ignorance. We must not repeat that mistake in the 21st century. The Bennett case remains open. The descendants remain protected. And somewhere, perhaps, the genetic potential for synchronized consciousness still exists in the human population, waiting, dormant, ready to express itself again under the right conditions. The story of the Bennett children of Copper Falls, Vermont is unlike any other case in the history of documented paranormal phenomena. It has everything skeptics usually demand: detailed medical records from credible physicians, dozens of sworn testimonies from reliable witnesses, physical evidence that survives to this day, perfect accuracy with 0 failed predictions, scientific investigation by respected researchers, and yet it remains unexplained. Dr. Nathaniel Morrison spent 20 years documenting impossible medical cases, but he kept coming back to the Bennett children. They haunted him until his death. In his final journal entry, written days before his predicted death in 1872, Morrison wrote, "I am a man of science. I was trained to observe, document, and explain. I have fulfilled the first 2 duties with the Bennett children, but the third, explanation, eludes me still. I believe their abilities were real. I have too much evidence to believe otherwise, but I do not understand how. I suspect it will be 100 years or more before science develops the tools to even approach an explanation." If you are reading this in some future age, with knowledge and instruments I cannot imagine, I urge you to seek understanding rather than exploitation. The Bennett children were not monsters. They were not witches. They were not frauds. They were 4 children who, through some accident of genetics and circumstance, became something we did not expect and could not explain. A distributed consciousness, 4 minds functioning as one, perceiving patterns in time that the rest of us cannot see. They tried to use their gift to save lives. We responded with fear and persecution. They deserved better. If such children exist in your time, treat them with the compassion and scientific curiosity we failed to provide. Do not drive them into hiding as we did. Some mysteries refuse simple answers. Some phenomena exist at the edges of our understanding. That does not make them evil. It makes them extraordinary. The Bennett children taught me that the universe is stranger than I imagined. I hope they taught you the same. 150 years later, we have neuroscience, genetics, quantum mechanics, and technologies Morrison couldn't have dreamed of. And still, we cannot fully explain what 4 orphaned children in a Vermont mining town could do. Were the Bennett children a genetic anomaly, an evolutionary accident, a glimpse of human potential we've barely begun to understand? Or were they exactly what Morrison believed, proof that consciousness is more fluid, more distributed, more interconnected than our current models can explain? The evidence says their abilities were real, every prediction verified, every witness credible, every detail accurate. Science says that's impossible. Seeing the future violates causality. Shared consciousness defies everything we know about how brains work. Both statements cannot be true, yet both are documented. So what do you believe? Are you willing to accept that 4 children saw death approaching with perfect clarity, not through magic, but through some natural capability we simply don't understand yet? Or do you think there's a rational explanation we've missed, some trick or fraud so elaborate it fooled dozens of witnesses, multiple physicians, and survived 150 years of scrutiny? The choice is yours, but remember, the evidence is real. The death certificates exist. The testimonies are signed. The predictions all came true. And somewhere, perhaps, descendants of the Bennett bloodline carry the same genetic markers, dormant, waiting for the right circumstances to express themselves again. 4 children, 4 types of death, perfect specialization, perfect accuracy. The Bennett children remain one of the most thoroughly documented and least explained mysteries in medical history. If this case fascinates you, if it challenges what you thought possible, if it makes you question the boundaries of human consciousness, then subscribe to this channel. We bring you the most rigorously documented, unexplained mysteries in history, cases that were buried, hidden, suppressed because they challenged everything. Cases like the Bennett children, where the evidence is overwhelming and the explanation is impossible. Hit that notification bell. Share your theory in the comments. Tell us, do you believe consciousness can be distributed? Can siblings share thoughts? Can humans predict death? And most importantly, if you discovered you had such an ability, what would you do? Would you use it to save lives knowing you'd be persecuted for it? Or would you, like the Bennett children, disappear into history to live in peace? Until next time, remember, some mysteries refuse to stay buried, and some truths are stranger than any fiction we could imagine. The Bennett children saw the future. Science still cannot explain how. Both statements are true, and that, perhaps, is the greatest mystery of all.